Hi everybody, it's Chris Moyes at the Vinyl Orchard, and welcome back to another video. I thought today I'd share with you my jazz fusion collection, at least some of it anyway. Just in terms of some recommendations really, stuff that I think potentially you could look out for or stream or listen to, stuff that you might want to pick up to add to your collection, or stuff that might introduce you to this particular genre. Now, I'm not going to attempt to rank it because I think this is not music for the faint-hearted, and sometimes I blow a bit hot and cold with jazz fusion actually. Sometimes I think it's just, a bunch of amazing musicians playing at the height of their creative powers, and other times I think it's musical masturbation, complete self-indulgent tosh. So I do blow a bit hot and cold with it, but over the years I've collected quite a lot of it. Now, one or two albums I've had for 30 years plus, but a lot of the albums I've picked up in the last 5 or 6 years, and certainly during COVID, during the pandemic times, when I was working from home like many of you, I found myself when I was working and writing, reaching out for instrumental music, and I realised I didn't have very much actually. So through recommendations through the vinyl community, but also through sites like Sea of Tranquility, I started to pick up much more jazz fusion and add it to my collection. So today it's just sharing some recommendations, things that you might want to listen to, either to add to your collection or to start your collection. Now, the starting point of jazz fusion was often seen as Miles Davis's In a Silent Way. This is a repress. It's a 1969 album, has a bunch of absolutely amazing musicians who will go on to play in other bands and do solo stuff within this genre. So Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, Wayne Shorter, David Holland, Joseph Zawinul, John McLaughlin, and Tony Williams. Really good album. The album that followed that I don't have actually, which is Bitches Brew. And I struggle with Bitches Brew actually, and I haven't got it. I probably will pick it up one day. But this is the album that followed Bitches Brew. So this is music for the soundtrack for the film about the boxer Jack Johnson. This is a repress. I think the original cover looked a bit more like that, possibly. This has got Herbie Hancock still, John McLaughlin, but it's also got Billy Cobham. And I think it potentially is the first time that Billy Cobham and John McLaughlin play together. And there's a real tension and a real electricity on this band. A bit more patchy possibly than the first one, but a really good album, worthy of your listening if you haven't heard it. Some people regard the debut album from the Mahavishnu Vishnu Orchestra as being the first jazz rock album. So this is the Inner Mountain Flame. Tremendous album. This has got Jan Hammer on keyboards, as well as Billy Cobham, Rick Laird, John McLaughlin. It's also got Jerry Goodman on violin. Now I struggle with violin on music, I really do, on rock music. I just don't like the sound of it very much. So I like that album. And I also like this album as well by them, Birds of Fire. But if I'm honest, the album by them that I reach for the most is this one. This is Visions of the Emerald Beyond. Now, this is a slightly different lineup. John McLaughlin is obviously still on it, but gone is Billy Cobham. In his place, Michael Walden, Narada Michael Walden is on here. Gone is Jerry Goodman, and Jean-Luc Ponty is on here playing the violin. And violin is less to the fore actually, I think, on this album. Tremendous album, real groove, some fantastic playing, and I think their best album personally. John McLaughlin played on a whole variety of other stuff as well. He's got quite a lot of solo stuff. That's, I think, one of the better ones possibly. Lots of stellar players on this. This is electric guitarist from late 70s. An album that's quite a bit of an outlier actually in his collection is this one. Devotion. I think this is from 1970, and you can kind of tell by the cover that it's the kind of sound that it might have. It's really heavy. The guitar playing is incendiary. It's like proper fiery stuff. It's proper psychedelic actually, but that's a really good album. Devotion from 1970, I think that album is. Now on the Miles Davis album, obviously Herbie Hancock appears, and if you want to hear about the sort of the evolution of jazz into jazz fusion, then a track by Herbie Hancock is probably worth listening to, contrasting to the early version of Watermelon Man from the kind of mid-60s that he plays on, but also this version from Headhunters. And you can tell the difference, I think, when you've got a kind of a Fender Rhodes and everything else being played. So that's often seen as his classics. Great album, really funky. I think this album possibly edges it for me. This is from 74, so 50 years old now. Wow. This is Thrust, proper funky album. Track on here called Palm Grease is great. That, I think, if you've only ever heard Headhunters, you might want to listen to, and you liked it, you want to listen to Thrust as well. Now, Wayne Shorter, Joseph Zawinul went on to form Weather Report. This is a band that I blow hot and cold with, actually. I think they were quite slow starters. This is often seen as their best album, Heavy Weather, and I do like it. I prefer this one, Black Market. I think this is a tremendous album. I love the cover as well. That's a really good album. One of the reasons I probably struggle a little bit more with Weather Report is they haven't got a guitar player as such, so it lacks that kind of sound for me. But an album where I think they really do get it right is this one. This is really funky. This is a band really, because they were quite slow starters. This is a band really finding their sound, actually, and I think this is great. Boogie Woogie Waltz is tremendous. It's a really good album, that. But I think where it all came together, for me personally, anyways, Mysterious Traveller, Cucumber Slumber, which is a great track on here. This is an album where I think this is the band at their peak, personally. An album that's influenced Carlos Santana, apparently, for some later albums that he did. But really, really good album, worth seeking out. So one of the players in Miles Davis, Chick Corea, formed a band called Return to Forever. This is seen as their masterpiece. This has Stanley Clarke, Lenny White, Al Di Meola, and Chick Corea. And I like it, but I prefer this one. This is Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. This is the only album, I think, by Return to Forever to feature Bill Connors. This is a much heavier, much more guitar-orientated album, actually. Guitar in here is brutal. It's really fiery album, tremendous. If you haven't heard it, really worth it. But I think this is the one that I reach to the most. Where Have I Known You Before? I think this is a gorgeous album. Vulcan Wells is tremendous. Beyond the Seventh Galaxy is just fantastic track. That ends the album. So this has got the classic lineup of Chick Corea, Lenny White, Al Di Meola, and Stanley Clarke. Al Di Meola had a solo career. This is often seen as his best, and I think Elegant Gypsy is a tremendous album. This has got Jan Hammer, Steve Gadd, Mingo Lewis, Barry Miles, Paco de Lucia. It's got some tremendous musicians. Guitar playing off the chart on this album. It's absolutely brilliant. Barry Miles on there produced quite a few solo albums. He's got a nice line in knitwear as Al Barry. Look at that, lovely. This is a nice album, actually. Obviously much more keyboard orientated. He really stretches out on this album, actually. One track, Roots, which I think closes the album, is really, really good. But if you've heard Elegant Gypsy but you haven't heard much more about Al Di Meola, then I possibly would reach for this one, Casino. Tremendous album. Again, the guitar playing is just astonishing. It's really, really good. It's kind of got some Latin kind of feel to it, as well as that fusion kind of feel, but brilliant album. So also part of Return to Forever was Stanley Clarke. I think this is his first album rather than that one. I'm not sure which way around it is. They're both seen as classic albums. The issue I have with stuff by Stanley Clarke is he's a bassist, and bass to me is something that is in the background that kind of drives the song, that's, gives it the bottom end. It's not something that should be as a solo instrument, and bassists will probably be shouting at the screen at this moment, but I don't want to listen to a bass solo, so these are good, and these have got stellar musicians: Billy Cobham, George Duke, David Sanchez is on here. David Sanchez appears on this album actually as well, and David Sanchez plays guitar. He's a multi-talented man. He plays guitar on a track on here called Concerto for Jazz Rock Orchestra. It's 14.5 minutes, and it's absolutely brilliant. Now, this is not better than those two albums, I don't think, but that song, Concerto for Jazz Rock Orchestra, is fantastic. It features David Sanchez. David Sanchez played on lots of people's albums, but also produced his own solo stuff. This is David Sanchez and Tone, and this is called Transformation, the Speed of Love. That song, the title track, it fills up one side and is absolutely amazing. David Sanchez is a proper talented musician. Wow, he can do it all. So in Return to Forever was Lenny White. This is, I think, his second album, Big City. A whole host of amazing players on here. We've got Jan Hammer on here. Jerry Goodman is on here. Brian Auger is on here. Also a guy called Neil Schon, who plays with Journey. He's on here on a track called Dreams Come and Go Away for Jimmy. And it's a proper jazz rock, wild guitar wig out. It's absolutely fantastic stuff. Ray Gomez plays on that album, great guitar player. CBS tried to make him a solo musician. He's more of a session guy, I think, than a solo person. Plays on lots of people's albums, tremendous guitarist. But they tried to make him something he wasn't. This has got some AOR tinges on it, as well as some beautiful jazz rock fusion moments as well. West Side Boogie, just search that out, amazing guitaring. So Lenny White's first album though was this one, Venusian Summer, which I think is absolutely tremendous album. This is really worth seeking out. If you see this in the shops, pick it up. It's brilliant. There's a track that closes the album. It's just over 11 minutes long. It's called Prince of the Sea, and it's got Aldi Meola playing guitar on it, but also Larry Coryell. And I'm not sure those two people play together very often, if at all. This maybe is the only time they ever did. But that track, the guitar playing on it is absolutely wild. Now, Larry Coryell was a tremendous player, often seen as like the godfather of fusion, actually. And if you just want an introduction and you saw this album, this is the essential Larry Coryell. This is a really good best of the early part of his career, and it's really worth finding. This guy's super, super talented, and that's a really good album. As is this live album, actually, at the Village Gate. This is really good as well. Just a three-piece. I think features his wife actually in it as well, but that's a really, really good album. But the album that I reach for of his back catalogue more than anything is Barefoot Boy. It's just got 3 songs on it. One side is just one song called To the Higher Consciousness, but Gypsy Queen opens the album, which is the song that is tacked on to the end of it. It's by Gabor Szabo. It's tacked on to the end of Black Magic Woman by Santana, but this is a nearly 12-minute version of it on here, and it's just fantastic. So Barefoot Boy, Larry Coryell, really worth finding, as is a band that he put together called The 11th House. This is really, really good album. This is a super, super tight band. So this has got Randy Brecker. Now Randy Brecker plays a trumpet, appears on so many jazz fusion albums. It's also Alphonse Mouzon, more about him in a moment. How cool is he? Amazing. Larry Coryell, blind keyboard player, Mike Mandel, long sort of term friend, I think, of Larry Coryell, and Danny Dryfin on bass. This is brilliant, this album. And the one that followed it was Level 1, which a lot of people actually think is slightly better. I don't. It's certainly... they're tighter on this, I think, but I think the song quality is better on that first album. But this is really, really good. Again, just how cool is Alphonse Mouzon? I mean, he puts the rest to shame, doesn't he? Tremendous album. Alphonse Mouzon was a great drummer, and as I said, look at that. How cool is he? This is a tremendous album. So this is from 74? I think this must be 50 years old. This is on Blue Note Records, and I've had this one of the longest of all these albums, actually, and the reason for that is it features on it a guy called Tommy Bolin. And if you watch this channel, you'll probably hear me talking about Tommy Bolin quite a lot. He was the replacement for Richie Blackmore in Deep Purple. He played with the James Gang, with Energy, with Zephyr, played on Billy Cobham's Spectrum, which I'll come to later, but he also plays on here. Now, Spectrum, which we'll see in a moment, is a great album. I personally prefer this one in terms of Tommy Bolin's sort of input into it. Mind Transplant, Snowbound, Calm Dark Side all have actually Snowbound, Calm Dark Side are the ones with Tommy Bolin on it. Golden Rainbows has Tommy Bolin on it. Nitroglycerin. Now, Tommy absolutely shreds on that song. So if you've not heard this album, I think it's really worth seeking out. I think it's a great, funky jazz rock album featuring some absolutely brilliant musicians. You can tell with people like Tommy Bolin, he's just literally ad-libbing it. It's tremendous. Also on here is a very, very young Lee Ritenour. And this is, of all the albums, he's kind of a bit more of a soft kind of jazz sounding man actually, and so I kind of steer clear generally of his stuff, although I do think this album, last course, or is it first course, sorry, I think this album is really good, but it's that's kind of softer end really of jazz fusion, but that's a good album. Just mentioned Billy Cobham and Spectrum. This I've had for a long time. The reason for that is obviously Tommy Bolin's input into this album, Quadrant 4, which is just wild, it's just brilliant. And of course it's got Stratus on here as well, with that amazing bass line on it, and we'll come to the person who did that later. That's a great album. If you've got Spectrum and you want to explore more Billy Cobham, then I possibly would stop off here. This is Crosswinds by Billy Cobham. This is a great album. It's got some tremendous players on here. It hasn't got Tommy Bolin, but it has got John Abercrombie on here. But a really good album. It's also got quite a lot more horns. The Brecker Brothers are on here. And the Brecker Brothers actually, not only did they play on loads of people's albums, they actually produced their own as well. This is proper good, funky, brass-driven album actually. Again, got some great players on here. David Sanborn appears on here actually. But the two Brecker Brothers playing trumpet and sax and various instruments on here. Some skunk funk, tremendous album. This is also heavy metal bebop. I remember hearing this actually in the kind of late 70s. I think this is 77 or 78. I remember hearing East River, which is a vocal track, but the rest of it, some skunk funk is on here as well. That's a great album, really, really good. So if you like the kind of more kind of gentler stuff, the Lee Ritenour stuff, you might like Steve Kahn. So Steve Kahn, this is, I think, I've heard quite a few albums by him actually. He does do solo stuff. He plays on lots of people's albums as well. This is called Eyewitness. I love the cover actually. It's a beautiful cover, and I think this sounds like if the Police played jazz fusion, this is what they would sound like. And I think from that respect, this is an album worth trying to listen to. So Steve Kahn, it's from 80s, I think. Doesn't say. 1980, possibly 81, somewhere around there. Eyewitness, The Police meets Jazz Fusion, really good album. Also similar kind of era, if you like, and similar kind of sound is Robben Ford. This is his debut. He's a seriously talented young man, certainly a young man at the time of playing this. Really good album, obviously maybe influenced by sort of Wes Montgomery, that kind of sound, but Grant Green, but certainly a really good jazz fusion album. And he also played with a band called the Yellow Jackets. This is, again, it's kind of that softer end, it's more Fusac kind of sound really, I guess, but really, Matinee Idol, good song. Some good tracks on here, again, nice kind of gentle background music, nothing particularly in your face. And that kind of gentle, that sort of particular tone of guitar is something that really drew me to this guy, Pat Metheny. I love the work of Pat Metheny. I've got probably a dozen albums by him, and it's hard to pick up maybe what I think is necessarily his best stuff. So I'm going to attempt just 3 albums here. This is First Circle. It's a gorgeous album. Longtime partner Lyle Mays, keyboard player, is on here. This is a really, really nice album, as is this one. I think this may be his debut actually. This is the one that's got Jaco Pastorius on it. This is a fantastic, Bright Size Life. This is a really, really nice album as well. So if you're listening to you're looking out for an introduction to Pat Metheny, that could possibly be it. If you want to explore it a little bit more, I think this is the album that I go to the most in his catalogue actually. It's an album by Pat Metheny and Lyle Mays, and it's called As Falls Wichita, So Falls Wichita Falls. And it's just a beautiful piece of music. The title track fills the first side. It's beautiful, and that would be certainly worthy of your attention, I think. So at that sort of soft rock kind of soft jazz rock kind of end of this genre, we've got also Larry Carlton. Larry Carlton, again, influenced maybe by the kind of Wes Montgomery kind of sound, possibly, But not nice album, maybe at the softer end potentially. Certainly when you hear him live, and this is live 335, and it's called 335 because this is a Gibson 335 and he always plays one of those. This he really stretches out on, and this is a really good album. Painted Up is fantastic, but he is able to let loose live and certainly sounds almost a different musician. Now, Larry Carlton got loads of solo stuff. He played with Steely Dan also, and he also played with the Crusaders. Now, the Crusaders started off obviously as the Jazz Crusaders. This is Old Socks, New Shoes on Tamla Motown, but also went on to produce a good run of really nice, funky, more kind of softer end of jazz fusion. I showed this one on the vinyl tag. I love it as my funky album. This is a great album. Spiral, Keep the Same Old Feeling. And then there was the blues. It's kind of rhythmic and funky, and it's just amazing. Musicianship is stellar. This is also really good. I think it's the album possibly came before that. This is called Southern Comfort. That's a really good album. It's a double album. Again, round about the same time. Free as the Wind. That's a really nice album as well. Larry Carlton obviously on that one. And then there's this one, which I think is the pick actually. This is a really, really good album. This is Chain Reaction. When's that from? 1975. Really, really good album by the Crusaders. This, I think, is... this is a guy who's been around for a while. I think he plays keyboards on For Your Love, the Yardbirds song. I'm sure he's on that. And it's Brian Auger. And this is Oblivion Express, or Brian Auger's Oblivion Express, their first album, recorded in 1970. I think it's released in 70 or early 71 on RCA Records. This is, I think, a classic of this genre. So if you've not heard this, stream it. If you see it, buy it. It's absolutely brilliant. I think this is a tremendous album. Love it. So that's Brian Auger's Oblivion Express. If you like keyboard kind of sound, obviously you can't go wrong with kind of Jan Hammer stuff. This, I think, is one of his best albums. This is Oh Yeah. This has got, it's got 8 songs on it. He does stretch out on occasions. Most of the songs are over 5. Magical Dog, which opens the album, is really, really good. This is a great album. I think this is possibly his best, actually. He also appears on loads of other people's albums, but this is a really good example. I love the cover. It's a beautiful cover, that. This is John Abercrombie, Timeless. Features Jan Hammer and Jack DeJohnette. I love the cover, although it's a little bit like the Microsoft Word logo, but it's a great album. The track Timeless, which closes the album, it's 12 minutes. It's ethereal, sparse, just beautiful, just beautiful. Sometimes I think when's it gonna get going, and other times I think it's beautiful, but most of the time I do think it's just magic. Absolutely gorgeous. Now Jan Hammer also plays on the kind of 2 jazz rock albums that Jeff Beck did, or some of the 2 of them. That's the first one I think he did, which is Blow by Blow. Tremendous album. I think George Martin produced that one. And this one, which I think is better actually, this has got Jan Hammer on it. It's also got, has it got Narada Walden on it? Yeah, Michael Walden is on here. This is probably the most experimental that Jeff Beck almost got in this kind of area of music. Absolutely brilliant album. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And if you're familiar with those 2, which I'm sure lots of you are, then you may be less familiar with that one. This is Jeff Beck, There and Back. This is a great album. Again, features Jan Hammer. Also has Mo Foster and Simon Phillips. Now, Simon Phillips, wow, there's a super talented drummer. Blimey, he can play anything. You know, he was on Judas Priest's Sin After Sin, and he can play jazz rock as well. He's amazing. This was also really worth looking out for. This from 77. Jeff Beck with the Jan Hammer Group. Oh, this is absolutely brilliant. This is 2 stellar musicians absolutely stretching out. This is a brilliant album. Really, really good. If you like keyboards then and you like the jazz, you're probably aware of Soft Machine's Third. That's pretty jazzy. That's certainly worth looking out for. That'll be familiar. But if you want something a little bit different, but it's by the same band, then look no further than Bundles. This is the album that features Alan Holdsworth on guitar, and that was the first time I ever heard Alan Holdsworth was on here. Has a profile, just listen to that. Wow, the guitar playing is absolutely amazing and vastly different from this. So tremendous album. And Alan Holdsworth, although he has got some solo stuff, actually plays on loads of other people's albums as well, and pops up alongside Bill Bruford on some of his solo albums. So this has got Bill Bruford, Alan Holdsworth, Jeff Berlin, Dave Stewart. Not Eurythmics Dave Stewart, another Dave Stewart, Canterbury Dave Stewart. Two really tremendous albums. If I was going to say which one is better, not really sure about that. I possibly would say that one, possibly. But these are two really good albums. Bill Bruford, seriously good drummer. As much as, I think drumming should be a little bit more in the background than the fore. My God, can he ever play? Obviously with King Crimson, yes, and so on, but also fantastic solo artist. Alan Holdsworth also pops up on this album. Now, if you're aware of Gong and you're aware of the hippie trippy, flying teapot Gong, then, you're maybe not going to be ready for this. This is Pierre Moulin's version of Gong, which is vastly different to the early kind of Gong. This is Gazooz, and this is a really good slice of jazz fusion. Alan Holdsworth on here is absolutely tremendous. Brilliant album, actually. Really brilliant album. He also appears on this album, Alan Holdsworth, on this album by Jean-Luc Ponty, who played with Mahu Vishnu Orchestra on Visions of the Emerald Beyond, and a few other things, obviously, as well. This has got Alan Holdsworth. It's also got Daryl Stuermer, who plays as the touring guitarist with Genesis, who is... I'd love to hear kind of a bit more from him, actually, because he seems like an absolutely amazing guitar player. I saw him play with Genesis many years ago. He's tremendous. It's also got Steve Smith on it as well, who was the drummer in Journey, the Escape era Journey. Proper good drummer, actually. He's not just some bloke that plays in the back of an AOR band. This guy's a serious player. So that's a good album. And actually the violin is less violin sounding. It's almost a bit more guitar sounding on there, and it mixes nicely with Alan Holdsworth. If you've heard that one, if you've heard Enigmatic Oceans by Jean-Luc Ponty, and that's the only thing, you like that, then I would also look out for Imaginary Voyage as well. This is a great album. And again, it's got Daryl Stuermer on it. No Alan Holdsworth this time, but I think he's just as good. So the early album, or the first album I showed today, was Miles Davis in a Silent Way. It features a very young drummer called Tony Williams, who played in a band called Tony Williams Emergency. No, Tony Williams Lifetime, I think it was. Yeah, Lifetime. That brought out an album called Emergency, which was poorly produced and all over the place and really harsh on the ears. Considerably better is this album from '75. This is the new Tony Williams Lifetime, and this is an album called Believe It. Tony Williams, an absolutely awesome drummer, fantastic drummer. This is a really good album, and again, this has got Alan Holdsworth playing on it as well. Tremendous guitar player, tremendous British guitar player. If you like your drummers, then you're probably aware of Shlomo Yamashita, drummer and percussionist. Really interesting album, this, actually. I love the cover. I remember seeing this in the shops in the sort of 70s and nearly buying it just on the basis of the cover. I really liked it. And also he produced this album. So his band often was called Shlomo Yamashita's East Wind. This is Freedom is Frightening. Absolutely beautiful cover. Absolutely beautiful cover. Possibly the cover, I often display the covers on the wall. And this one often appears. I love the cover. Possibly the cover's better than the album. It's all right. The album's pretty good. And on here you've got a couple of guys, Hugh Hopper, who played with Soft Machine, and a guy called Gary Boyle. And those two players went on to form a band called Isotope. And I think this is their first album. This is their second album, I think. Both are good. I would have said this one is possibly slightly better than that one. This is the one that's got Hugh Hopper on it as well. So that's a really good album. But Gary Boyle, great player. He's also on this album. He's also on the third album, which I have as well. Gary Boyle also did some solo stuff. This is pretty good. This is on Gold Records, as are those. That's, not bad album. I don't know if necessarily I would seek it out, but it's pretty solid. Now, here's another guy that's possibly worth looking out for. And many of you will know of Rod Argent from the Zombies fame and know some Argent stuff, but he also did a solo album called Moving Home. And this has got Phil Collins on it, Alphonso Johnson, Gary Moore is on here, you know, and this has got Rod Argent playing Fender Rhodes and Mini Moog and Mini Moog and so on. And this has got some real fusion moments, actually. This is a really, really good album. It's also got a guy called Maurice Pert on it as well, who we'll come to in a moment, but that's a really nice album. Now, Gary Moore, Gary Moore, long departed now, tremendous player, can play the blues, can play the rock, can also play jazz fusion. He was in a band called Colosseum 2, which came out of Colosseum with John Heisman, and produced, this is their debut album, Strange New Flesh, which is pretty good. Their second album, which was War Dance, I think is their best. This has got Don Airey on it, who plays now in Deep Purple. Really good album. And then Electric Savage, which I bought back in the late 70s as a result of seeing Thin Lizzy live. I sought out loads of Gary Moore stuff and I bought this. And to be honest, I struggled with it actually when I first did buy it, and I kept hold of it, and I've added the others to my collection as time has gone on. But good albums, especially War Dance. Now, Don Airey, who plays with Colosseum 2, still plays in Deep Purple, but he played in the version of Deep Purple that had Steve Morse. Steve Morse was also quite a fusion player as well. And if you're into your fusion, then you probably would have come across What If by Dixie Dregs. Really different album, actually. Really different. Steve Morse plays guitar, synthesizer guitar, electric guitar, classical guitar on here. Steve Morse was often voted as guitar player's guitarist kind of thing. Just a amazing player. Absolutely amazing player. And there's some really good stuff on here. You know, British rock fans will know one of the songs on here really well because it was the theme tune for, or one of the songs used on the Friday Night Rock show, Take It Off the Top. So really, really good album by Dixie Dregs. Other really good albums that I think are worthy of your looking out for. Phil Collins, who appears on that Rod Argent album, obviously played with Genesis, but he also had a side project, and that side project was Brand X. This is their debut album, and I think this is their third album, possibly. Both of these, I think, are absolutely brilliant. Now, although Phil Collins, is often seen as his band because he was the famous person, actually the John Goodsall, who is the main, and Percy Jones are probably the two driving forces behind this. These two albums are brilliant. If you've heard these and you love it, then, and you haven't heard anything more by them, I'd go looking for this. This is the album that doesn't have Phil Collins on it. It's called Masks. It has instead Chuck Berge. I can't think who he played. He played with Rainbow actually, but he's also played with some other bands before that. I can't remember who now. Someone quite famous. But anyway, this is a really good album, and for me, this is right up there with those two. So good stuff. Phil Collins, obviously a drummer, as was Mingo Lewis. So Mingo Lewis played with Santana. This is called Flight Never Ending, and the title track, which closes the album, is just so fiery. Great guitar playing. That's a really good album. I really enjoy that actually. Mingo Lewis and Flight Never Ending. So Mingo Lewis appears on an album I've had by a band for a very long time actually, and this is seen as their jazz rock album. So we're talking about Santana. This is Caravanserai. This is the version of the band that played on Santana 3, which I think is possibly one of their best albums. It has not only Carlos Santana, but it has Neil Schon, who went on to play with Journey. It has him as well. Absolutely brilliant album. This is where Carlos Santana started to explore the kind of more jazzy stuff. He also did an album called Welcome. He also did a collaboration, Love, Devotion and Surrender, with John McLaughlin. And again, this is a really good example of an album where you think, oh, these two absolutely amazing musicians playing just at the height of their powers or is it just a bag of wank? Is it just people who are just being so self-indulgent and couldn't care less? Are they laughing at us by playing this stuff? I really don't know sometimes. So I sometimes think it's brilliant. Other times I just take it off instantly. But it's certainly interesting. But if you like that kind of stuff by Carlos Santana, then it might be worth you exploring a little bit further. And these are two of his solo albums. So this was the first one. No, this was the second one. The first one was called Illuminations. This is the second solo album. That's really, really good, actually. Really good. As is this one. This is a double album as well. And both have got that kind of fiery jazz rock feel to them. Really good albums, but with that Latin kind of sense as well. And if you like that Latin kind of jazz approach, then I think Louis Gasca's album, I'm just trying to think what it's called, actually. I don't know if it is called anything. Anyway, this album by Louis Gasca, it has got a title, and I'm going to find it out. This is an album that's got basically Santana, Those Who Chant, I think it's called. Yeah, For Those Who Chant. This has got Carlos Santana, Neil Schon is on here, Greg Rowley is on here, Lenny White, Michael Shreve's on here, Stanley Clark's on here, Mike Carabello, Jose Chapita Arias is on here. You know, this is Santana, but with horns. And it's a really, really good album. And an absolutely beautiful cover. Fantastic cover. Other kind of brass sort of things, Stan Getz got into the kind of jazz fusion scene for at least one album. This is Captain Marvel. This has got Stanley Clarke, Chick Corea on here. Tony Williams appears on here. So this is Stan Getz's jazz fusion input. And then I've got a few kind of, mainly these are British and American stuff, but a few kind of European and worldwide stuff. So let's go worldwide first with Brazilian Diodato. This is an album, this is tremendous. This has got the theme to 2001 A Space Oddity. So Alas Sprach Zarathustra is on here. Brilliant stuff. This has got Billy Cobham playing on here as well. This is a really, really good album, actually. Really good album. Stanley Clarke appears on here as well. So some really good jazz musicians, jazz rock musicians. And that's the debut album from Brazilian multi-instrumentalist Diodato. Billy Cobham also appears, as does Rick Laird, actually, on an album that I shared on the vinyl tag, as maybe no one else has got this, although someone did say they have. I can't remember who it was now. Was it Graham Allen? So this is Clive Stevens and Friends. It's got Ralph Towner, who played in a band called Oregon. Steve Kahn, who I've shown earlier, he's on here. John Abercrombie, Rick Laird, Harry Wilkinson on percussion, Billy Cobham on drums. Good album. Not as good as maybe that lineup should have been on an album, but nonetheless really good. Billy Cobham obviously produced that amazing album Spectrum, and we probably all know and love, even if you've only ever heard it through a sample. Was it Portishead that sampled Stratus? But that bass line was done by a guy called Lee Sklar, and he also plays in his own band, The Section. There he is there. He's got his own YouTube channel, actually. He's got a shed load of subscribers, actually. A really interesting man. He's played with lots of different musicians. In fact, The Section, although they produced, I think I've got 3 of their albums. I don't know if they produced any more than that, actually. But they're like a house band. And they were, is it Arista, I think, with Joni Mitchell and Jackson Browne and so on. So these players here have played on James Taylor, Carole King, Jackson Browne, Linda Ronstadt. They've played as the backing band. This is like the Toto of the jazz rock world, really, The Section. And this is a really, really nice album. It's got a really, really good groove to it. It's fantastic. Going into Europe now for the last few, so 39 minutes, hang on in there, folks. If you like your jazz fusion a little bit more proggy, then this is a Danish band from Copenhagen, Secret Oyster, Sea Sun. This is a nice album, keyboard orientated, but really interesting, beautiful cover as well. Finnish, multi-instrumentalist, or he can play keyboards, plays guitar as well. I think he also plays sax as well. Is it Jukka Talonen? Yeah, Jukka Talonen, Finnish instrumentalist. This is a really nice album. I think he also played in a band as well, but this is, I think it's a repress. It's on Sonnet Records. Really good. Focus, one of the players in Focus, Jan Ackerman, has produced a number of albums which have that kind of jazz fusion feel to it. This is really funky, some in places almost poppy. Really good album, really, really good. It's kind of guitar, funky, fusiony kind of album. Really worth listening to. And also a couple of Swedish guitarists, two albums by a Swedish guitarist, Janne Schäfer as well. This is the British version of his debut album, slightly different track list, called The Chinese, slightly different track list from the debut album that he did bring out, but this is the British version of it. That's tremendous. And the second album, I think, is just as good. That's really, really good album. And you may well have heard this guy play before if you didn't realise it. So if you've heard Waterloo, SOS, Eagle, I Had a Dream, he plays guitar on those. So that's ABBA's guitarist, or was ABBA's guitarist. And then last couple, German this time. This is a band that's the brainchild of a guy called Klaus Doldinger, and they produced a number of albums with very similar covers. Passport of the band. This is Cross Collateral. I think this is the best album. It's got beautiful groove. It's quite funky in places. Musicianship is fantastic. It's melodic. Really nice listen. You can't really go wrong with any of their sort of first 5 albums. They ended up being a little bit kind of schmoozy and soft, kind of, Fusac kind of sounding, but this is a great album. You may be aware of his work because he did soundtracks as well. That's a brilliant soundtrack, actually, Das Boot. If you like your jazz fusion a little bit funkier, then you really should seek out, if you haven't already, Mr. Magic by Grover Washington Jr. This is a lovely album. I really like this album. This has got Eric Gale playing guitar on it, and there's some really nice guitar moments, actually. Really proper good album. Really nice. Got a real groove and a real funk to it. It's lovely. Also quite funky, actually, and this is... I think this is quite fusion. It's got a couple of vocal tracks, but the rest are instrumental. And this is an offshoot of the Allman Brothers, Sea Level. So this is their debut album. It has J. Johnny Johnson, Chuck Leavell, Lamar Williams from the Allman Brothers, and is a really, really nice album. It sounds like a fusion version of the Allman Brothers. It literally sounds like that. It's a great album. You might have heard of a band called Pig Bag as well. I think they had a hit, didn't they? Was that Papa's Got a Brand New Bag? Great. Papa's Got a Brand New Pig Bag. Great song. But this is a really nice album, actually. All instrumental. A band that obviously just like a good time. You can imagine them being half cut when they produce this. It's just good fun, and probably loosely is connected to the genre of jazz fusion. On the electronic kind of end of jazz fusion, you will be aware of Einstein A Go-Go. Well, this was the band that produced that, but this actually is quite a nice bit of electronic jazz fusion stuff as well. So again, that's worthy of you listening to if you like something like that. And the last one was a guy who played keyboards, guitars, again, really talented man, with Ian Dury and the Blockheads. His name was Chaz Jankel. And he wrote a song called I Know Corrida, which Quincy Jones did a cover of. That's on this album. But this has got some really nice kind of almost funky, smooth jazz fusion moments. Chaz Jankel, his debut album from 1980, I think. So there we go. That's 44 minutes. If you made that, amazing. So there's some recommendations for you. Let me know how you get on. Let me know if I've missed anything. I'm sure I have. I've got loads of other albums. So if I've missed it, it's not because I don't like it. It's maybe because I didn't have the time or I don't possess it. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing. And we'll catch up again really soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.